In the last episode of All Costumes Ranked, the last real one, we covered the Hollywood douche with the flashy set of clothes, Johnny Cage. Today we're shifting from Hollywood stars to Outworld royalty by looking at Princess Kitana. Similar to characters like Melina and yet to be covered Ermac, she's had quite a limited appearance, but her designs have changed drastically. So today, by popular demand, we're going to be ranking all 25 of her costumes from the worst to the best. For real this time.
Fight!
Good morning, afternoon, and evening everyone. Nick here, and welcome back to the channel. We're back and we're looking at the blue-clad lady ninja of Mortal Kombat, Kitana. One of the most popular characters in Mortal Kombat 2, and a fan favorite of the series, no pun intended there. Similar to her clone sister and actual sister, Melina, depending on the timeline, she's got plenty of cool costumes. So cool in fact that ranking all of them was quite challenging. Today we're ranking all 25 of her designs based on how cool I think they are, along with how iconic these designs are. Here are the rules for the series. Rule number 1, I'll only be basing off the original costume from a title, so if it's repeated such as classic skins remade as DLC, that'll only count as one placement. For this video, I'll only be looking at costumes that appeared in the games, so the designs from MK Legends will be omitted. And for rule number 3, I'll only be going off base designs without gear or color alterations. No gear alterations from either MK11 or MK1 will be factored. Also, in both of those titles, some costumes that are part of an existing set do have some alterations, such as the Revenant costumes having a non-Revenant version with a human look, or the clothing colors changing in her new era set, but with that god-awful hair. To make it easier and to simplify this ranking, those bonus skins won't be included. And rule number 4, we are not going to include story-exclusive costumes. In the final chapter, you can run into a bunch of weird variants of Kitana, and those won't be included. And since MK1 is an ongoing game, I'll only be including skins featured from MK's inception to MK1 as of April 2024 pre-Ermac launch. This ranking is also just my opinion, it's not the definitive list. Without further ado, grab your fans, put on your Khan crown, and blast Princess Nokia's Kitana at full volume as we rank all 25 of Kitana's costumes. In last place is the Dark Empress costume from Mortal Kombat X. For being the Queen of the Netherrealm at the end of MKX's story, couldn't they have gone with a better design? Sure, some of the concepts in this costume look okay at best, like the bodysuit and the heels, odd glowing veins, and the skin color, but that flower crown blossoming like that just really kills the entire costume for me. You really couldn't have come up with a better Revenant design for the Queen of the Netherrealm? Well, actually they did. It seems like MK11, when that came around, they quickly forgot about this costume and remodeled it to hell, literally and figuratively. I'm sorry, but beating any living tower 10 times is not worth this prize. This easily is Kitana's worst costume. Moving ahead from the nearly 10-year-old game to the more than 20-year-old PS2 fighter, Deadly Alliance. At 24, we have Kitana's alternate design. I just look at this and go, okay, something is off. For starters, Kitana ditched her iconic blue and now goes for a faded purple, semi-resembling her mother, Sindel, with the color scheme. On top of that, the lipstick she's wearing just looks a little odd. The outline doesn't look normal if you ask me. Maybe this is just a trend that I'm not too familiar with. I also think that the leggings she's wearing really doesn't fit Kitana too much, but maybe more like Melina or Sindel, but it just doesn't look that great on her. The only real positive I have with this is the hair. If I were to rework this, I'd fix the color to make it more like her royal blue, rework the leggings and fishnets, and also add a mask. I feel like that would have helped it pop a bit more. Now, I'm not saying that this design is terrible, I just think it's not a great fit for Kitana as a whole. Speaking of faded color palettes, we're returning to MKX with our second Revenant design, this being the base Revenant look from the story. I do like some aspects of what this costume is trying to do, but a lot of it is just common complaints I have with many MKX costumes, which is the lack of color. I do appreciate they tried making the MK9 and tournament costumes look more gothic and creepy, but I feel like it's missing something. Sure, the yellow veins are fine, but I really wish the color had more pop, or at least instead of it being super bright, it was actually like a navy blue or something darker like that. I feel like they really could have made it more gothic if they really wanted to make it pop pop a bit more. I feel like it's just missing something to make me a bigger fan of it. I honestly hate to put this one so low on the list, but number 22, we're looking at our first special edition costume from the DC Elseworld skin pack, the Catwoman of Outworld variants. Don't get me wrong, some of this costume is really top notch and having Kitana as Catwoman was a great fit, but the execution feels like a missed opportunity. Honestly, this really just feels like they took the base human Kitana costume, made it glossy black, and gave it some cat ears, along with adding a whip in the back. Unlike the Killer Karaka or the Gearside and Noob Saibot laughing costumes, this really feels like it didn't get much love and attention. All those costumes put a hell of a lot more detail to make them A-tier costumes. Adding a whip and ears doesn't do a whole lot, even the cat mask is fine, honestly. If they managed to make this more referential to Michelle Pfeiffer look with all of the stitching over it, then it feel like it would have stolen its way to the top 10, but for now, this skin lost its 9 lives and lands at 22. Okay, so the first few costumes we ran through were some that I thought were meh to kind of underwhelming. Though we're only 3 entries in right now, the rest of this was super difficult to put together. From this point on, these costumes would go from a B to higher, so if you see a costume you really liked ranked low, that doesn't mean it's a bad costume. Many of these could have easily tied for a single placement. In fact, many of them were almost tied just to make this ranking easier, but because it is a ranking, I had to put them in a numbered order instead. I just wanted to let you all know before we continued. Enough blabbering and let's move on. Our first look into the B tier with Kitana's alternate design, which was shortly featured in the final act of the MK9 story. I'd honestly say this costume is good. It does a good enough job to separate itself from her base design. It changed her hair and removed the mask, the sleeves were a nice addition, and the cloth was removed and it's now in the behind instead. Though I prefer many other costumes over this one, I still think it's pretty good. Moving on to our second special themed skin, coming from the Samurai skin pack, is Jingu Kitana. Named after the legendary Japanese empress Jingu, who was considered to be the 15th Japanese imperial ruler, something so historical for a DLC costume. For a while, when I tried learning Kitana until I gave up, this was a go-to costume of mine. I really like how much they made her look like she actually fought alongside samurai for this design. For real, she looks like a Samurai Warriors character, ready to fight alongside Nobunaga, Oda, or square off against Haomaru. Not gonna lie, I'd really like to see more fun costumes like this for the MK Ninjas. I think it'd be awesome. Like a samurai strike, it slices right in at number 20. Moving on to our third maskless Kitana costume by, appropriately and funnily, looking at her first third dimension jump with MK4. Honestly, MK4 Kitana just looks alright. It retains a similar look to the MK3 redesign, but removing the mask, some detail along with changing the hairstyle. Now sure, the model doesn't look the best, but in terms of the costume, I just think it's pretty good. Nothing too crazy, it doesn't do anything completely crazy by redesigning the character like Reptile, it's just a fine look. It does a great job sticking with the traditional roots, but just giving it a slight update. At number 18, let's take another look at the Revenant Kitana, looking at her revised version from MK11, being the Pain Point variants. Though it's the weakest of the MK11 Kitana Revenant variants, I still think it's a good design. Sure, it pulls some of the similar moves MK11 costumes do by removing some elements or replacing them to make them feel different, but it kinda works for me with this one. This one removes the shoulder plates and shows off more straps around the neckline. It's enough to help make it pop and a much better Revenant design than her first 2 outings at the bottom of the list. Speaking of Revenant redesigns, at number 17 we're looking at the second to last Revenant skin from MK11 and of the series with Melina's favorite variants. This is the base design Kitana we see in MK11's story. It's more detailed than the previous entry, adding more shoulder plates and more detail around the waistline. It comes off a bit more gothic and adds more of that needed undead punch. Though it's a good Revenant design, there's just one that I like slightly better, which, speaking of, our third and final Revenant design is Quan Chi's Pride variants. After teaming up with Kronika, Kitana gets more of a power boost and gets her armor upgraded. Though it's extremely similar to Melina's favorite, it adds a bit more onto it with 2 of the same shoulder plates and opting for more Netherrealm glowing spikes to the design. Honestly, of the hellish redesigns the Revenants got, this one stands out the most. It's a little bit over-designed, but I think it kind of fits this character a bit. But if there is one thing I wish they did add to make it pop a bit more, is some crown. Maybe the one that we see in MK11 story mode, or even something like my variation set I have here. Overall, a great rework that's just cool as hell. At number 15, we're moving from the depths of the Netherrealm to the world of superheroes, looking at the questionable crossover Mortal Kombat vs. DC. As of right now, this is the lowest ranked costume from this series, and though it's ranked low, I still think it's really good. I like how they transitioned away from the classic look being redesigned from the arcade trilogy and went for a more modernized, updated look. The mix of black and bright blue looks pretty good. It honestly fits this world of superheroes that we have in this title, giving her some long gloves too that make her kind of look like a vintage superhero or something like that. I even like how they changed her hair a bit on this one too. I really like the flowing ponytail. Now honestly, if there is one change I would make, I do think the texture of the costume does look a little interesting. She honestly looks a lot like a superhero you would run into at like Islands of Adventure or something like that. Like it doesn't look like cloth or armor, it looks kind of fake, like it looks artificial a little bit. But besides that, I think this was a great modernization and a good way to update the character. At number 14, let's put those pitchforks and torches away because we're looking at the base design from her first outing, Mortal Kombat 2. I feel like I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this one, honestly. But honestly, I think the costume's just pretty good overall. Even though it's pretty basic and simple overall, I think it's a great design. Similar to what I said in the Melina ranking video that you can check out up here, it just looks like an 80s vintage suit or 90s workout outfit, just with that very bright blue. And I honestly do think that the blue does pop a bit more than Melina's pink. Yes, sorry for saying purple in the ranking. My apologies, and thank you for pointing that out in the comments. So if there is a color that I do prefer in the classic ninja look, I would say I like Kitana's a bit more, mainly because it doesn't blend too much with the backgrounds a bit. But I will say that when this costume did get reintroduced in the NRS trilogy, it was a sweet treat. Honestly, this costume looks the best in Mortal Kombat 11, and it's one that I tend to use more often when I do try out Kitana here and there. Also, a little fun fact for you, she was originally considered to be in Mortal Kombat Classic, and this is when her original name was Kitsune. It was eventually passed because I couldn't figure out a official design or idea behind it. After reworking her and coming up with an official origin, she made her way into MK2 and she became a fan favorite. With that, let's continue. At number 13, we're popping in 2 more quarters and we're looking at her second debut in Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. Similar to what I said in the last entry, this is very similar to the Melina one, but instead I think the blue pops a bit with the art style and environment of the game. Along with that, I really do like the updates and modernizations they made with this one too. Opening up the chest a bit more and putting some laces, making her have some longer boots with some color mixing in there, having a nice mix of blue and black. It's just a great look overall. Similar to her MK2, and to borrow a quote from Chucky the Killer Doll, a true classic never goes out of style. We're taking a reimagined look at MK2 with the next entry in our list being the Shaolin Monk's Kitana design. Honestly, this is a really good mishmash between MK2 and MK3's designs, along with even some PS2 sprinkled in there too. She retains the high boots from MK2, and she even has like the vest of UMK3, which is a great look. I even like how they completely altered her hair, and they even added some black accents in there too, just to make it pop a bit, along with her eyeshadow. I always thought that looked really good, and it was a nice detail to this design. It's a great reimagining, and unfortunately, this costume has not seen an appearance since this release. Hopefully that can change with another update in Mortal Kombat 1 sometime soon. Overall, an amazing readaptation for the number 12 spot. Taking one more final look with the PS2 era costumes with her base design from Deadly Alliance. Talk about readaptations and modernizations. This is a great rework of her MK4 look back then. It honestly took a lot of my complaints that I had with her MK4 look and just revised them, adding more black accents to make it pop a bit more, changing her hair so it has this nice little flow to it. Along with that, I even like some of the silver accents they put on her belt, knee pads, and even the earrings. It's just the little things that help make it pop a little bit more. Of her PS2 outings, this is definitely my favorite one of them. Early on before we continued, I mentioned that every placement from 21 onward would be in the B ranking point because they're all that good. Now that we're entering the top 10, I'd say this is either an A or an S tier ranking. This rest of this costume ranking was extremely difficult to put together, so bear with me here. Many of these could have tied in a placement or something, and even when writing, I flip-flopped constantly, so at the end of the day, this is the ranking that I went with. Also, if you made it this far in the ranking, go put a fan emoji in the comment section down below. With that, let's continue. We are cracking into the top 10 and finally taking a look at Mortal Kombat 1. The first of 3 costumes we're looking at are her Shiva Renatai variants. Quickly shown in the MK1 story during the parade sequence, this really gets to showcase Kitana's royalty in such an amazing way. Though blue is such a big focus of this costume, I do love all the other colors that blend with this, and it just makes it pop that much more. White, gold, and even the fan, depending on which one you choose, just helps make it pop a ton. Along with that, I even like the crown that she has with it too. All of these amazing details, designs, patterns, all flow together so well, and it doesn't feel like it's over-designed or it's too distracting on the eyes. One final point or two, I do like how they made this costume maskless. We're able to see how pretty Kitana and the face model Quinn Chi really is. She was a perfect fit for this new era Kitana. Overall, one of my favorite and one of the prettiest costumes that Kitana has to offer. Entering number 9 with our second to last costume for Mortal Kombat X, that being the tournament costume. Though this is a rework of her base design for Mortal Kombat 9, there are some slight modifications just to make it stand out a little bit. For one, her hair is different, she doesn't have the bangs, and the ponytail looks slightly different than before. Along with that, the color is a little bit more faded and the blue is just a bit darker. Third thing, they ended up covering up Kitana a little bit more. Between MK9 and MKX, there were some complaints going around that the female fighters were a little bit too sexualized, so they managed to cover up just a little bit for this reimagining. Even though the sexiness is toned down a bit, I still think this costume looks really good as a whole. After I obtained this one playing the game, I managed to use Tournament quite a ton. Though the years have changed, I definitely have chosen a different go-to costume when I picked this character. Overall, still one of my favorites from this game as a whole, and one of her best costumes. Time to reboot into the 8th spot with the beautiful Edenian princess Kitana with her base design from MK9. My god, this is just such a great readaptation from the arcade and PS2 era. Personally, I think that going with a brighter blue was the best choice for this costume. This costume also stands out because it just looks super beautiful and elegant. I even like the detail and the texturing in the costume just helps make it pop that much more. I even like how much they changed her hair too, giving her a mix of bangs and ponytail, along with a little crown and some earrings you can see in there. It's just a nice way to differentiate herself from the other 2 lady ninjas of the game. Overall, this is just one of my favorite pretty designs that we've seen for Kitana, especially in the rebooted era. I can see why many people really like this costume a lot too. I know many people really got into Mortal Kombat with MK9, and this is their first time seeing the character. It definitely has some great staying power. I think it looks amazing. Like her projectiles, I'm a big fan of this one. Lucky number 7, and we're looking at the second of 3 MK1 skins, being the Union of Light or Titan Kitana costumes. This shows up if you really grind the character, something I really haven't done, but I do have this variant we can look at. And this also shows up in the MK1 story, well, spoilers if you haven't made it that far in the story, where you find out that there was a timeline where Kitana did have the hourglass and we get to see her later in the story. Where many of the costumes usually went for like a blue approach as the primary with usually white or black as the secondary, it was a great opportunity to see the team switch it and have white be the primary and blue be the accent, and this was a great way to showcase it. Along with that, I also like how they changed the hairstyle a bunch too. The exotic armor that she has really makes sense and it makes it look more Edenian, super pretty and also very practical. I know many people are very mixed on this game as a whole, but when it came to the designs, they really nailed it out of the park. Union of Light Kitana is a true showcase of that. Like a Titan, this costume is just godlike. Looking at our final Mortal Kombat X design by looking at her base look. For the longest time, I used to think that this was a very over-designed costume and one that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but I think this costume really grew on me over the past few years. I used to think that it was very flashy, but the more I look at it, there's just a lot of detail added to this costume. I really like how they drastically changed her hair. Instead of it being in a ponytail like it used to in the past, they kind of retain a reimagined look of her UMK3 design. And even though that the MK9 to MKX jump really toned down the over-sexualization of the characters, I'd really really think that more apply to Sonya Blade and Melina because this costume on Kitana really makes her look flashy in a unique way. Much of her skin is still exposed if you look more at the leg line. With the dark blue being the primary, I do like a lot of the gold accents and even some of the straps around the costume. I just think it's a nice touch. I'm really happy that this costume grew on me over the years, and even looking at some of the comment sections when I announced doing this video, many people put base design as up there or their number one, and honestly I can see why. It's definitely one of the best costumes we've gotten for this character. Number 5, and we are looking at one more special edition costume coming from the summer skin pack, the Endless Summer variants from MK11. Of all of the special edition costumes we've gotten, this is probably my favorite for Kitana. They have her rocking some really cute looking kimono dress, and I even like the hat that she's wearing. For a while I know a lot of people said that this would be a great way to reintroduce Ashura. Even though it's a special edition skin, this honestly looks like something Kitana would actually wear, which is what makes this so good and something so high. It's just a perfectly fitting costume. I really would love to see this as like a main costume down the line for maybe MK1 or even MK12 or MK13 or whatever the timeline's gonna be. I don't know anymore. Either way, I just hope this costume's part of that future. Number 4, and we are looking at our final MK1 design for Kitana being the New Era variants. I really had a hard time with this one. At one point it was my number 1, but I think where I'm at now, this is at my number 4 for a good reason. I still think it's amazing. Instead of going with like a more outworldy vibe that she had in the original timeline, it's cool that we get to see her embrace more of that Edenian look. There's a lot of great mix between royal looking blue and silver in this costume. I even like how they have like some tight leggings she's wearing, and they even kind of call back to her ultimate MK3 vibe with the open chest that she has with the laces going through it. On top of it, I even like the little silver crown she has on her head, and I even like how they redesigned her hair. Again, they just nailed it. I have no complaints with this costume. This is one of my favorite Kitana costumes of all time. Honestly, the team just really nailed it with the New Era. Alright, so spoiler alert, the top 3 are all from Mortal Kombat 11, but since they're all so similar, this really took a long time for me to come up with a order to put these in. At one point, I almost just said they're all tied at one point, but because it's a ranking, I decided to split the 3. They all have some slight updates between each one of them, and I want to point that out as we go from number 3 to 2 to 1. This was so hard to put together, but at the end of the day, I think this was the definitive Kitana design if you ask me. And without further ado, let's get into it. Taking the bronze medal of all of the Kitana designs is Electric Edenian. This really goes for that similar vibe that I saw with the MK1 Kitana, just having more of like a suit that she's wearing that's super tight, that's also practical and ready for combat. I love the mixing between the black and blue, it just really pops, along with the pops of silver in there. The one big feature in this that pops the most is that there's a scarf that hangs over her shoulder, which is honestly an amazing addition. I like this one a lot. This costume's just very electrifying. Our runner-up at number 2 will go to the first princess variants. Honestly, this one just looks super amazing, and I absolutely love this one a ton. Instead of having this scarf like the last one did, she now has 2 shoulder pads, and she has a strap around her neck, which is a cool look to it. Along with that, they even updated her leggings too, where closer to her waistline, they have some exposed skin there too, along with the loincloth added there. On top of that, I really like the mix of the black and blue once again on the vest. They even changed the pattern a little bit from Electric Edenian to First Princess. Another slight modification is when you look at her shin pads, the shin armor pieces actually have a different design to it. Though very minor, it does a little bit to make it pop just a bit more. I'd put this at a very high A when it comes to a tier ranking, but there is one costume that I would put as an S. At number 1, we have our S tier costume being the Edenian Blue variants. This one feels like a great mixture between the previous 2 costumes we've looked at, and it's just a great costume overall. This is the human Kitana design we see after the timelines are merged in MK11's story, and it's a great costume to have featured in this story mode. I really like how prominent these shoulder pieces are. They're slightly bigger, and it makes her look like she's more ready for combat. Another slight addition they made to it is if you look around her clavicles, you can see that they changed the pieces there as well. It's a nice little change from her first princess variants. I feel this costume was super good, that this was probably the main inspiration for her MK1 design. My only hunch is that the costumes look very similar when you put them side by side. Overall, I'd say that this is the definitive Kitana design to me, and for many people in the comments, they would say that this is probably one of the best Kitana designs. For how iconic it is and just for how great I think this costume looks, this is by far the best Kitana costume of all time. game. And there you have my ranking of all 25 of Kitana's costumes from the worst to the best. Which costume was your favorite and which was your least favorite? Or if you dare to rank all 25, go ahead and share those down below. Remember that my ranking isn't the definitive one or the right one. It's just mine, and I'd love to hear where you're coming from. Also, while we're posting our own rankings and thoughts down below, let's just be respectful to one another, okay? Also, I want to say thank you so much for all the support for the costume ranking videos lately. I'm honestly super happy that I decided to bring this series back after a long hiatus. I've been seeing a lot of your feedback and some of your requests too to see characters on these, such as Yoshimitsu and even Chun-Li. But if there's one character I'm super excited to bring onto this series, it's Ermac. After seeing the latest teaser that was put out, I can guarantee that his MK1 design is no longer at the bottom. But I'll have to rank him after the character drops. And speaking of the character, his trailer's coming soon, so I'll definitely get a reaction video out soon. And I know if you tuned into Rain's Twitch the other night, you did notice that some people were asking about Tekken Smasher Pass, so stay tuned, that'll be coming soon, along with more content from us both. As always, thank you so much for all of your continuous support. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. It really means a ton to the channel. My name is Nick, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Fight!